Lupita Mañana, Chapter 4. Much to Lupita's relief, Salvador didn't hail any more automobiles that day, and none stopped for them. Lupita was ready to run inland if any did. They sat down twice to eat on rocks beside the road. Behind them, a mile or so away, mountains rose up to a sharp blue sky. At their second stop, Salvador warned her, "Be careful. Watch for scorpions under the rocks and for víboras, rattlesnakes, lying on top of them." "Sí, Salvador," Lupita replied. Then she asked, "Where shall we stop tonight to sleep? Can we find a place that will be safe?" Thinking of the robbers, she added, "I had not thought our own people would rob us." Salvador laughed. "No. If a person has money, anyone will rob him. Tonta, fool." At sunset, they came across a ruin of a half-finished concrete block building. It was surrounded by high weeds and cacti, and inside some wild pigeons roosted. We will sleep here," Salvador announced, after he had scouted a small room for scorpions or tarantulas. "We will sleep in the corner over here." He pointed to the corner nearest the door. "What if someone comes here tonight?" Nodding, he pointed to another door leading out to the back of the ruin. "There are 2 doors. We can go out the other one then. Now lie down and sleep, Lupita." Lupita lay down with a sack of food between her and the wall, and Salvador lay down beside her. "I wish we had a blanket," she said wistfully. "Should we make a fire?" There were matches inside the food sack, too. "You don't need blankets in September. Go to sleep. If I could bring someone here. Perhaps we will hear coyotes, but pay no attention. They won't come in here. If one does, I will shout at him." "Salvador," Lupita moved closer to her brother. "Salvador, was I brave? Did I do well when the robbers came?" "See, I was not ashamed of you. You put your head on my shoulder if you want to, but do not weep." "No, Salvador." Lupita, shivering in the nighttime breeze that came in with the fog from the ocean, heard coyotes howling in the night, but none came into the ruin. In the morning, she and Salvador ate more eggs and tortillas and drank some of the water in the bottle. The bottle was almost empty by now. Walking was a thirsty business. When he saw Lupita's worried look, Salvador said, "We'll get more water at Rosarito Beach. Remember, Uncle Antonio said we would be sure to get some there, if not before." Once more, they took to the road, walking north toward the United States border. Again, they did not seek rides, and no one stopped to offer one, although many cars passed them. The sun grew so hot on their backs that both took off their jackets and carried them. Lupita was glad of Salvador's baseball cap. It kept off some of the heat. Both she and Salvador complained of their sore feet. They made faster time than Salvador had expected, and they walked into Rosarito Beach with the morning only half gone. The town was much smaller than Ensenada, but it had a few hotels, stores, and service stations. At one of them, Salvador asked the man who was pumping gas to let him fill the water bottle from his hose. "Sí," the Mexican told him as he examined Salvador and Lupita out of the corner of his eye. When they left, he gave them a crooked grin and shook his head, but said nothing. Across the highway, walking north again, Lupita said, "I think that man knew where we were going and what we want to do." "It does not matter, Lupita, as long as he does not rob us, too." Some miles further on, they took a road running inland away from the sea. Before she turned onto it, Lupita stopped and looked back at the ocean she'd known all her life. In the late afternoon, it was purplish blue beneath the flaming gold sun. She murmured, "Papa, papa," then spun about and ran to catch up with Salvador. As they approached Tijuana, they saw more and more automobiles of varied colors, shapes, and sizes. When the cars passed them, they created gusts of wind that Lupita felt as blows on her body. Some 5 miles away from the city, she spied an enormous circular building standing where bullfights took place. By the time the bullring was out of sight behind them, it was dusk. As they walked along the highway, some cars came perilously close, as if the drivers were playing a cruel game with them. Over and over, she and Salvador jumped out onto the roadside. While Lupita prayed, Salvador cursed and shook his fists at the disappearing cars. It was full dark when they came to Tijuana, walking beneath the steep hills on the right side of the road. Lights twinkled around them. People lived on hills here too, as they did in Ensenada. Salvador refused to gasp at his first view of Tijuana Central District, but Lupita stood awestruck. Never had she seen so many lights. White, red, green, and yellow neon signs, all blinking and flashing. The shop windows were alit, filled with displays of gleaming silver or leather goods. Never had she seen heard so much noise. Street vendors were shouting their prices. Drivers were honking their horns, trying to get other drivers out of their way. Cars were squealing to a stop at red traffic lights and then roaring off again at the green ones. The loud, bouncing music of trumpets and guitars came at her from every direction. Every shop they passed blared music. The street was crowded with people, Mexicans and Americans, more gringos than Lupita had ever seen before. There were young ones and middle-aged ones and even old ones, gringos all, with yellow hair and light brown hair. Yellow hair and light brown hair, and even hair as red as chili peppers. One, a young woman, pointed at Lupita as she and Salvador stopped to stare at a winking nightclub sign of bright pink and red lights. The gringa spoke to her companion, a man her own age, and then they both chuckled. Lupita became afraid. What was this woman saying? Was she about to make trouble for her and Salvador? She reached out for her brother's hand, but could not find him by her side. Where was Salvador? He had been there only an instant before. Where had he gone? Lupita looked about her frantically for Papa's black and white coat. There was Salvador, standing a distance away from her, looking at something on the wall of a building. Running over to him, she gazed up too. Her cheeks flaming, Lupita looked down at the sidewalk. There was a color photograph of a long-haired woman wearing a red-spangled costume that covered even less of herself than the bathing suits the gringa tourists wore in Señor Aguilar's swimming pool. To her horror, she read the name over the picture. Lupita Lasso. Her name! She dances in there, Salvador gestured to the half-open doors of the theater. Lupita looked directly at his face, not the shameful photograph, and said, Salvador, we must find a place to sleep. My feet are very sore. I cannot cross over the border tonight. Salvador turned away from the photograph and said with a laugh, Her name is Lupita too. All right, I won't look anymore. She's old anyway. My friend who was here in Tijuana says there is a park. He told me it was not far from the place they play games of Hari Ali. That is where he slept when he was here. Will it be safe there? He said the police came there so often to inspect that he found it hard to sleep at all. Bueno, I'm tired. Lupita took hold of her brother's hand and held it tightly as they stepped off the sidewalk's high curb and waited in the streets for the traffic lights to change. Her heart beat fast as they crossed the Avenida Revolucion, Tijuana's most important street. The city, with its hundreds of automobiles, flashing lights, crowds, and noise, frightened her. Would it be like this over there, too? Would Indio, California, be like Tijuana? Arriving at the park early, Salvador and Lupita found an empty bench. They lay down on it together and tried to sleep, but they got very little rest. Men and boys looking for a place to sleep prowled all night. Then came the police with flashlights, searching for troublemakers. Lupita awoke 3 times, startled by a light shining on her and Salvador. Satisfied by the sight of the 2 boys, the police moved on through the park. Just before dawn, a cramped and aching Lupita listened in spite of herself to the conversation of the 2 men sitting on the bench to her right. They were talking about the war, and she could tell from their voices that they were viejos, old men. One said, It was 40 years ago, the Great Yankee War. That was when we were invited to go over there and work in their fields. The gringos took us in buses, and they kept us in their houses and fed us. We were called braceros then, and we made much money. Those were the good days. Do you hope to go over there again? The other asked. See, the man laughed in the dark. Who does not hope to go and make much money? Do you? No, I am too old now. I have no family over there. Do you? See, a son and 2 nephews. I will go mañana to visit them, and then in 3 days I will come back. You will not try to find work? No, he chuckled. I am far too old to sneak over. It is too hard for an old man like me. Do you want a cigarette? See, I know what you mean. It is indeed too hard for viejos like ourselves. The conversation ended when both began to smoke, but Lupita stored what they had said in her memory. Salvador had been correct in thinking that getting into the United States to work would be difficult. It would be different if they were going only to visit. These 2 old men had confirmed what her brother had told her. Ay de mí. She had hoped he would be wrong. Breakfast in the park consisted of the final 2 tortillas and eggs and the last of the water. Lupita stuffed the bottle into her sack with the matches and put it into her jacket pocket. Let's go to the border now, Salvador told her. We can see what goes on there. Obediently, Lupita arose and followed him out of the park. There were no flashing neon signs in Tijuana by day, but the music still blared from the shops. After Salvador asked directions of a small boy, they crossed the Avenida Revolucion and turned onto the Boulevard Chicnotec. Then they crossed over the dry bed of the Tijuana River onto a road that led past the district called the Colonia Libertad. Early as it was, a stream of cars heading in the same direction. As the tube approached the border, they saw that many of the automobiles had parked. People were getting out of them and walking along the roadway and sidewalks. Ay de mí. The expression of dismay burst from Lupita as she looked at the border checkpoint. A high metal fence stretched along each side of the border, and a large building was set in the middle. Through the building's glass windows, she could see people standing in lines. She could also see men in green and tan uniforms, Mexicans and gringo guards standing together. As she and Salvador stood back studying the building and fence, Lupita noticed that other people were also staring at the fence. None of them went forward, although other men and women passed by, chattering of visiting in San Diego and Los Angeles. Lupita edged near Salvador. Do you know a way to cross over? No, not yet. We just arrived here, remember? He gave her an annoyed look. We'll go back into Tijuana and ask around. People there must know many ways. Salvador, we have eaten all of our food. Buy more. We can find a shop that sells food. On the way back to the center of Tijuana, Lupita ducked into an alley and opened a seam of her jacket. She took out some pesos, which she handed to her brother, and then she pinned the seam back together with a safety pin. At the first grocery store that they passed, she bought a box of crackers and a can of refried beans, which the shopkeeper opened for her. That would feed them for 2 days, Lupita estimated. She put the food carefully into the cloth sack, and then the 2 of them went out into the Avenida Revolucion. For all his pretended bravery, Lupita saw that Salvador was too shy to ask anyone how to cross the border. Everyone moves so fast and with so much purpose here, not the way they did in Ensenada. Even the midday siesta time spent in the park seemed shorter than at home. Though footsore from their long journey, Lupita and Salvador investigated Tijuana's major streets from one end to another. What things they saw! Women selling bunches of great orange, yellow, and scarlet paper flowers, men selling menudo, a spicy tripe dish from a cart, even a wild-haired fire eater who took a swallow of alcohol and put a lighted torch into his mouth and blew red flames toward the passersby. Fearing that her baseball cap would ignite, Lupita clutched it to her head, turned, and ran away. The fire eater, amused, yelled at Salvador to catch his little brother before he ran south all the way to Mexico City. After they wandered past another bull ring to Calle Número Uno and Calle Tercero, always looking for someone who seemed friendly and who might have the time to talk with them. Suddenly, on Calle Tercero, Salvador stopped in his tracks as he walked ahead of a weary-lagged Lupita. He stood rooted in front of a window shop. What interested him so much? Lupita caught up to him and she gasped aloud at what she saw. A hat! A charro hat, big and wide, glistening with gold and silver braids. Beneath this magnificent hat lay a pair silver spun with huge gold-plated star-shaped rowels. Lupita heard her brother sigh and she nodded. When Salvador had been a little boy, he had been greatly taken with the charros, who rode such fine horses in the parades in Ensenada on fiesta days. He had dreamed of being a charro himself someday, but charros were not poor cowboys, but rich men, and Salvador had learned that he, a fisherman's son, could never become one. His desires had moved to motorcycles and cars, but Lupita could see that the glamorous charro still held a place in his heart. As he went on gazing at the hat and spurs, a small man with a large mustache came out of the shop to lounge against the door jab and grin at them. You like the charro hat, eh, muchachos, eh? He asked them in a friendly way. Sí, breathed Lupita, pleased at being taken for a boy. Salvador pointed north and said, Are there any charros over there, senor? The man shook his head. Not like there are here in Mexico. I have been there many times and have never seen a charro. He asked casually, Aren't you going over there, muchachos? No, Salvador told him flatly. Don't you want to go and see the sights? Remembering the robbers on the road, Lupita stiffened and moved back, but Salvador answered, See, my little brother and I want to see what is over there. Why don't you go then? Salvador asked quickly. Senor, how does one get over there? To work? Asked the man. After a moment, Salvador said, To work. The shopkeeper nodded, gazed at the fine hat, and said, It can be arranged, muchachos. Do you have someone to go to in the United States? Sí. Bueno, that will make it easier for you. Come inside to talk. His eyes fell on Lupita. Don't be afraid. I am not going to hurt you. I can help you. Who are you? What is your name? She asked. I am Senor Diaz. My cousin Tomas is the man you wish to see, not me. Lucky for you, he is here now behind my shop. Come along. Come on, Salvador ordered. He and Senor Diaz stepped inside the shop, which sold items that charros might buy, such as jackets, ruffled shirts, whips, elegant riding boots. Lupita trailed the two of them, trying to behave with courage. Senor Diaz walked through a set of red curtains into a small back room where a man sat playing a solitary game of cards. He didn't resemble a shopkeeper at all. He was fat almost to the point of roundness, clean-shaven, and had a merry-looking face with a small, twinkling eyes. What have you brought in here today? He asked Diaz, with a chuckle. 2 boys who want to cross the border, Tomas. Eh? The fat man gave Salvador and Lupita a once-over. Then he asked as he slapped down a card atop another, Muchachos, have you got a place to go over there? Sí, Salvador said. Bueno, is someone expecting you? Lupita thought of the letter to Aunt Consuelo. She was sure her aunt had not received it yet. No, not yet, she answered. He sighed. You cannot go over there on credit if no one is ready to pay for you. So you must pay me now for your forged papers and to guide you across. Tomas held all the cards in one pudgy hand while he stared at Lupita out of the eyes that were no longer merry. Here in Tijuana, we use gringo money, dollars, as often as we use pesos. To take you over the border with me, I want $200 from each of you. That comes around to 4,000 pesos. 4,000 pesos? Stammered Salvador. See, that is what I ask, and so do the others who help people across the border. The fat man spoke to his cousin. These boys have no money. Get rid of them. Do not bring me children. When I go over tonight, I want to take the adults with me, not children. Tomas waved his hand. Go away, muchachos. You cannot hope to cross the border without a guide. Hundreds try every day and get caught. Go back to where you came from. Lupita didn't wait to be ordered out again. Whirling around, she fled through the curtains and out through the shop into the sunlit street. Salvador stalked angrily behind her. "Salvador!" she cried, but he grabbed her by one shoulder and put his hand over her mouth. "Be quiet," he hissed into her ear. "Don't cry. Let's get away from here and see where we can talk alone." At Lupita's nod, he let go, and both of them walked hurriedly down the street and around the corner into a littered alley. There, Salvador halted. In a whisper, he told Lupita, "I think that Tomas is as big a robber as those two on the road. If we had had 4,000 pesos, I wouldn't give him one of them, not a centavo. Did you hear him say he was crossing over with people tonight?" "See, I heard him. I did not like his little eyes." Salvador nodded. "Lupita, think. Why can't we be with him then? We'll watch him all day. I'll stay in front of the shop across the street, and you stay in back here. When he leaves, we'll follow him." "What if he gets into an automobile, Salvador?" "Even then, we must find a way to follow him."